welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am one of your hosts. My guest today is... Oh, wait a second. No. I'm completely leaving out my co-host.
That's fine. I'll just pop in, you know. I'm Stacy. I'm the other host.
and our guest today, almost exactly 2 years from the last time we spoke, is she wrote a book. Actually, she's written a few books, one of which was a short story I was just talking to Stacy about. But I don't know if you heard of it. It was adapted to a Netflix series. What was it called, Caroline?
You.
Oh!
I thought the word. I was going to say the word we're not going to say.
No spoilers.
Well, we're dancing around. Is what was the name? There. So you wrote a short story in a collection called, I think, Dark Stars, right?
Okay.
And it's a collection of horror, and I'm going to mention this before we talk about For You and Only You, because I think people need to read it, because I think, like, you wrote Providence, which is one of my favorite books of all time.
She talks about it almost
constantly.
all the time.
It's really
when I hear that, I thank you. Like that.
It annoys everybody how much I talk about it.
It doesn't annoy me.
Maybe other
I'm
people.
just like, did you reread it recently? Like, is that why you're talking?
No, I'm just obsessed with it. It's so good. But you wrote a short story in the Dark Stars collection, and what was it called? Because it's not called the word that I'm thinking. It's the only thing.
It's called The Attentionist.
Yes. So it's really, really good. I highly recommend Dark Stars in addition to all the U-books in Providence. But there is one word in that book that in that story that I will never hear it the same way again, and I mean that in the most flattering and frightening way. So let's talk about Joe Goldberg.
Just music to my ears. Yes, that word, and for the rest of your life, hearing it and having wonderful thoughts and amazing thoughts about nothing creepy ever.
Let's talk about Joe. So what's he up to in this newest book? He's curbed his bad habits, right?
I mean, sure, of course. It's funny that it's about 2 years since we spoke, because it was during, like he's telling you about his pandemic when we start, where he's one of those productive assholes who wrote a book and got his life together. You know the type. And so now, and he kind of worked the system a little bit and got himself to Harvard to be a writing fellow. And the promise was that they will all be people like Joe, like not killers, but people who got the short end of the stick and didn't go to college, haven't been discovered. And he gets there and everyone has more than he has. And we know he doesn't like that. But fortunately, there's a girl there who also got the short end of the stick. So,
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, the girl's name is Wonder. And I have to ask you, I love, and that is a pun, all of the names of the women who come into Joe's life.
They're such great names.
I love names. I'm one of those people, I name everything. Like right now I'm sitting on my couch. This is Corky. Corky, say hi.
Hi, Corky.
Love naming things so much, and naming characters especially. And I like the way sometimes you think about it, other times they just pop into your head, and Wonder is one of those pops. I think because of the accent, I try not to do this a lot. It's annoying, but Wanda, Oh,
that's true. So first of all, I love the fact that he has gotten himself to Harvard, and he's certainly very resourceful.
Yes. I mean, that's one of his most admirable qualities. And I mean that, where to me, I was sitting here in that pandemic, not learning to bake bread and thinking about him he'd have someone kidnapped in the basement, writing his book, networking, doing it all. He does believe in himself, and he does get things done. And that part of him, I think, if you took all the other parts away, there it is.
Yeah, pretty admirable. But I do love, I love just this whole journey he's the bookstore guy who, as we know, never went to college and, kidnaps people and keeps them in his basement. He goes to Hollywood or to California, and
Yeah.
suddenly he's in and he learns to be happening. He goes to, he works at a library. And so, I mean, he's adaptive also. There are many ways he could use his qualities
For
for
good.
good, like getting into Harvard.
Yep.
But he's such a fool for love.
Yes.
Not his ex.
He can't stand to
Not
see a
his
woman
ex.
be wronged. Like he just can't stand it. So
Of course. So Stacey, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit because I've been talking a lot.
Because you're always a good person to listen to and like jump off of. But I just find him so I was reading the Kirkus review before this, and he is very entertaining as a person. Of just like, what? Because he's like, sure, will I have some qualities of like like books, or that's the easiest one to say because we're librarians, but just something of like, it's like I'd never think that, like, what? And but it's like you kind of get it's a fictional book, but you kind of get like the kind of almost like true crime obsessed with it of like, how does he think this? Like, what is going through? How I would never like this is such a weird comparison to me of that. Like, it's like when I'm like talking with my husband, I'm just like, what? Like, why would you think that? Like, what? How? Like, I get very curious.
yes.
And I'm like, I gotta dig deep. And because it's his perspective, like you're just kind of like, oh my God, like, whoa.
Yes. Maybe if you had your husband write down all his thoughts for a day.
I know I should really be like,
Yeah, that's another thing that I love about the style of writing in these books. It's like you're living in this person's head.
mm-hmm.
And it's just that, so I guess like that's like one thing I kind of wanted to know. So first of all, how do you sort of because I know that
Get
the
into
TV
it?
series diverges
Oh.
from the books. How do you sort of figure out where Joe is going to go next? I know
Oh,
you
his
mentioned,
journey.
obviously like he had his pandemic life, which I actually kind of love because there seems to be, I guess now there's three schools in writing. There's the people who pretend it never happened.
Okay.
There have been people who sort of embrace it, and then there have been people who kind of graze over it. So how did you kind of decide, I guess, that Joe was going to have a pandemic life and sort of where it was going to send him after his last escapades?
It's scary, right? Because I did go through a lot of thinking about it, where I remember writing you when Lou Reed died and it went right into you. I was like, I'm committing, because at that point I already wanted to do more. But it was like, okay, now these books take place in our world with our events, and like not always in real time, but like with it. So I felt like I can't not acknowledge the pandemic, but it was scary because it's like when you're still in something to start thinking about it or telling story about it. And I saw other people doing it. It's like a little encouraging, but it did. I feel like You Love Me left off with him in Florida and in this kind of period of mourning. And I wrote this first draft of this book that was all Zoom, like where he was with these people, but in Zoom and doing the stalking. And it felt like too much pandemic. You know what I mean? Like one of those things that I feel like I had to get it out of my system to like show what Joe would do with these, these new parts of our technology. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to have it not lead with it, but have it be there. Cause I felt like because of the Lou Reed thing established so long ago, gotta stay with it. Gotta let Joe have his mask and have his fun with it. And it was interesting to sit here and think of his take on things. Like, I love that, like, for him to look at this as an opportunity to get away with things that he couldn't always so easily get away with. Like, never mind what you think of COVID. It's useful for someone who murders people. Like it was a time where he could take someone away and kind of easily rationalize his thinking and feel like a hero. And yeah.
So what did you do during
COVID? Just sitting in here going crazy, talking to Corky,
nobody was
using. That's when I wrote the story with the word,
Yeah, no, so there was nothing autobiographical about it.
No. If anything, I feel like this book has so many characters in it because for me, all that time without seeing faces, like the things I missed the most were like going to the coffee shop for that unplanned conversation. I'm so lucky I lived near to a coffee shop that's now gone, which is devastating. But, just the things we were spoiled by. So I feel like I wanted to give him all these, I don't want to call them friends, but all these humans to be around, because I was craving that. And then, like anything, the more I wrote the book, the more they became real to me. And I feel like, oh, this is, that's a Lou thing, that's a Sarah Beth thing. And I like that feeling. Yeah. So I made myself some imaginary friends so I could.
I like the fact
I love that.
yeah, I like that he's part of a fellowship in this. And I like the fact that, like again, it's like with Beck and her friends, like he was clearly on the outside. And this should be coming full circle where he's supposed to be on the inside with people who are like him. But it's very telling that no matter what, he always sees himself as the wronged and the outsider. And with somebody like Wonder, first of all, you definitely catch sort of that Boston life well. She works at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yep.
I have known many of people from that area, especially including my sister-in-law who worked at Dunkin' Donuts. That is a big thing.
Yep.
And so you went to you graduated from
Brown.
That's in the area? Am I making that up?
It's in Providence, so it's like an hour away. But I grew up in the Cape, so I spent a lot of time in Boston and around there, and over the years.
Did you go back for research, or were you just
that's a good yes. I went back expecting to like the campus bustling with students. And I have this problem sometimes, when you think of an idea and you get so attached to it that you don't necessarily think it through. So I got there and no, like classes were not in session. They were on Zoom. There was no one around. But I saw the biggest rats I'd ever seen in my life, which was kind of inspiring. Like,
whoa,
not the way they always say rats and kittens. No, these were like cat rats. So I didn't get to see a lot of students walking around, but I did spend time in the area and walk the walk and kind of do the eavesdropping and yes. Sit on the steps of the Barker Center and yeah.
Like now just try to imagine the cat rats, like I'd probably freak out.
Yeah, that was
like, what?
Sitting on a bench, like hiding somewhere, trying to map out kind of like where Wonder's house is when he's hiding, and already being like in my head, writing things on my phone, annoying, like scaring myself, which kind of gets that way when I'm writing, where I'm like, oh, like it's a feedback thing. And then this rat comes along and I scream at the top of my lungs, like knock over things and just run away. And I'm like, oh, so to that family, if you're out there, sorry.
So how was like this is so what I like about it is like so Joe is a book snob, he is a literature snob, but now he gets to be a snob about his own stuff.
Yes.
And about other people's stuff. How did you approach that a little bit differently? Did that make it a little bit more difficult to write?
It made it exciting to imagine like Joe, like the difference between writing and sharing, like to think of him writing that book and thinking he's the biggest genius that ever lived and to get the positive feedback, to get the validation, but then to find himself in this circle with people who have the right to criticize him. It was like, there it is. He is like going, like all of that is never going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, how is Joe ever going to allow people to be free to judge him? And to possibly say that he's not the next JD Salinger. And it was really exciting to kind of like, and to have that moment where he's waiting for those women to read him and they're not reading him. Like, I love those moments when he becomes relatable in certain ways. Like you send something to someone and whether it's a text or a book and they don't respond and the way he's got two of them that he's waiting for. And I liked the idea, like it also for me, like thinking about You Love Me, where he came from in that, where there was a scene in You Love Me where he's kind of rewriting his romantic history and renaming everyone. And that felt like the genesis of the book that he would write, the way that pandemic hits, you're just alone. For someone like him, who thrives also on stimulation from people, he's left with nothing but those reflections. So of course, to me, he would go into this book and kind of look back on all of his relationships and find that he is in the right,
But it's interesting because like, and you do talk about like real, like real world scenarios. Like a big pivotal moment of his had to do with 9/11 when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is like, I mean, pun intended, like almost like a bookend to that.
Yes. That's how it felt. Like, who knows about the future? But I also, this one really felt like, oh my God, it's talking to the other books and it's looking back at that book. And it was kind of like playing with them like dolls, like lining them up and allowing him to feel like all of it is coming together, all of it is making sense. And I think too, like, it's part of that place we all were, where everyone almost trying to have epiphanies after that pandemic or during it, or find the meaning. And I liked putting that energy into it, of this like kind of, well, something good had to come from that, because I feel like that's also a very Joe spirit of like trying to find the way out, the way to the light. And
Yeah, it like feels like it's like therapeutic in a way, of how you mentioned, Jessica, like full circle of certain things coming, or how you said talking to the books, of just like, I'm
yes,
excited because I have not read it and the book comes out soon.
yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yes, and I liked like too thinking of his past criticisms and his hangups with women and the way he gets like very nitpicky. And it was like, here's Wonder. You can't like, he can't criticize her. It's very hard. Like that was what was
Yeah.
so fun to write, that like Beck didn't do her shit, like she was a slob. It's like Wonder is this, like she takes care of people. And
And she works.
she works.
She works at a menial job, service job. There's, yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. There's
And
like,
she sees him, like she's she's attracted to him, all of it. So it was exciting to like get him that close to like happiness. And but
another thing I kind of actually want to talk about Wonder, which is like super super meta, is she writes like reviews on Goodreads.
yes. Yes.
I love
Like how we all
that.
start laughing.
So that was interesting. How do you like? I just like, it's so amusing. How did that all come up in the story?
Because that's like, it's been 10 years writing Joe, and as over the past 10 years, I feel like what's happened, there are more and more ways to stalk someone, to kind of get an idea of the self that they present. Like I was on some Bloomingdale's the other day and read this woman's review of these pants, and it was like the pictures she put up, you can see things that identify her, and the tone of voice is there, the way she looked at them. It was like, if you clicked, you could find out so much, in the way there are so many different avenues. And with Wonder, I liked that, like, that she's very anti-Joe in that way, that she gives everything 5 stars and she likes nuance. But at the same time, when it comes to herself, she's just very revealing. And the way a Goodreads essay can be a Goodreads review can be a lot of things. It can be a real review. It can be someone in a mood just getting it out of their system. It can be all gifts. It can be so many different things. And I feel like I liked, it was a way into this character of like, she goes on there, talks about herself, but it's not obnoxious. And she does find a way to like talk about the books and talk about her life, which isn't obnoxious. And I thought that's something Joe would notice and be like attracted to. And the way it just allows him to know so much about her, which to me is like, there's always like a warning in the writing of these, of like something that scares me, of like, when you don't, like, it's one thing on social media, you're very deliberately telling people things, right? Like if you go on Instagram and you tag yourself, you're saying, I am here. If you're writing reviews on Goodreads where you're referring to old trauma, family relationships, you're kind of casually telling your life story. If there's a Joe out there patiently reading all of your reviews, and the way that if you look at the scope of someone's writing, you can kind of see the like hills and valleys of their life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's what I liked too, the idea that he or she would have all of these reviews and he'd be able to know when she was in a good place, in a bad place, feeling good about herself, bad about herself, and also have to get past that surface thing of every book having 5 stars to know what she really thinks. Like I was like, I like this girl, I know this girl, and I'm excited for Joe to get to know her.
That's really exciting, because as someone like it's funny because I mostly give like, I'd say like 4 and up stars on Goodreads, because usually I'm like, yeah, I really like this book. I don't have lengthy reviews a lot of the time. Usually I'm like, I like this, I didn't like this, done, because I'm moving on to the next one. But I'll read a lot of reviews, whether prepping for a podcast interview or trying to figure out, like, I'm in a book club with friends of like, oh, should we read this? And I'll scroll through the reviews, and some of them, like you kind of said, they're like essays, and you could really see like how it touched upon people. People will really open up in some of them. And I never would have thought that of like as a way to kind of see into someone.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I like. It's like,
Wild.
it comes also, I feel like on Twitter sometimes someone will do a thing of like, here's someone's review of a book where whether they loved it or hate it. And then they'll post like that same person reviewing like plastic bags. Like these plastic bags, 5 stars, like the box was closed. It was not bent. They're plastic. The zippers work. I just love like the way if things reveal your personality without you necessarily meaning to or knowing it. And yeah.
Because I feel like you mentioned like with social media of like Instagram or something, like those also tend to be very curated. Like,
Yes,
you know, like I'm choosing to either tag myself in this or like, you know, telling someone don't tag me in that.
yes.
Like, but it's harder to kind of see like the real person. I mean, Joe is, you know, expert, knows how to really be like, I know I'm just like imagining him being like, I know you, like, hello, you, like,
And
I
the way
see you.
if you read someone's stuff, you can feel like you do know them.
Yeah.
Like if you read
very
them,
different,
there's
I
like
have
that
to say.
connection.
Yeah, I have to say very different than, you know, like Stacey was saying, like, you know, Beck was very, and I say Beck again because she was like the first girl that we
The
met.
first,
of course, there was Courtney was before her, right? Was it Courtney? Candace.
I was like, it was a C name.
Yep.
It is definitely a C name. I'm thinking Courtney. No, it's Candace. Candace was before her, but like we really got to know Beck as like she was like the first full show girl who we got to meet, and she was very much on Instagram, and you know, like everything was very visual.
Yes.
But there's a big difference between somebody who takes the time to photograph like their food and make sure that they look a certain way, and you know, like their Instagram, and somebody who puts themselves out there reviewing literature. That is like Joe's Instagram right there.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like Beck, what Joe didn't understand too is that like she'd gone to college with people and felt insecure about and like was trying to always fit in. And she'd been through an experience that in this way Wonder hasn't. Like Wonder is like Joe in the sense that she also was like, screw all that. I'm just gonna keep my writing private, stay with my kind of people. And now they're in this together. And it's like, I feel like if Joe could go back in time, now that he's in this fellowship, talk to Beck, he'd be like, I understand why you were on Instagram all the I understand why you were so self-conscious. Like,
would you still killed her?
Oh, so yeah.
Spoiler alert if you haven't read
the first one.
In the series, it doesn't end up well for
Beck. No, for me that I just like writing that first book, there was no other way, right? Like that I just knew that the whole time, and it was sad. But
so like, you wouldn't write an alternate version of you, which is like just a romantic comedy where these
like I have tried to do that. And I can write different kinds of things, like the story you read with the word. But whenever I try and write those, it's like someone creeps in with a gun. There was a joke on The Office years ago where Michael gets in trouble because he keeps whispering like, I have a gun, and like ruining the improv. And I feel like that's how I feel with my brain, that when I try and write like, look, it's just these girls hanging around, dating, everything is great. There's a love story. It's like, no. Someone comes in with a fucking gun or an agenda, and like, we're all, you know.
We're so glad that's how you write.
Yeah, good.
It's always so well written, like your books, and it's always so interesting because I feel like as a reader, I'm like, oh, I kind of maybe see where this is going, and then it's kind of like, no, you don't. Surprise! And I'm always like, oh my God.
To me, it's more like you're standing behind me while I'm reading the book with a crowbar, and I'm like, bang.
Gotcha.
It's a crowbar, like not even a knife.
The best crowbar ever.
A real weapon, yes.
So wait, so a gun isn't, but a crowbar. Okay, we're good.
Like like the way in movies, like they always conveniently have the crowbar nearby. Yeah, like I'm standing there with that, not a knife.
Don't you?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, first of all, like two things. So it's interesting that the timing of the book and the TV series sort of seem to come out around the same time. Is that on purpose at this point?
I feel like this was the first one where the book is coming after the season. And
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, like a few weeks after, like so close in time. But it was like I needed my time. I told them what I was doing. By season 3, they're going in such different directions and, you know, different stories, like the way love survived for so long in the show, you know, it's different. So so the show was last month. Now I'm like, now it's like Joe season. That felt good to me to have, like, he's just everywhere for a very long time.
Forever Joe.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, first, so the cohort, how did you kind of put those characters together? How were they based on anybody you know, like
The fellows?
Yeah, the fellows.
You know, it's funny, like, fortunately, no. Like, if anything, like little bits of me that, like, you know, when you lay in bed and can't sleep and think of stupid things you've done in the past or thought, like, I can't believe I had that thought. And then with the personalities, I was watching a lot of Food Network during that lockdown, more than I ever watched in my life. Not cooking at all, just like watching. And I like the way chefs have to have that arrogance to, like, go on there. That combination of arrogance and creativity was exciting to me. So I didn't base anyone on that, but I thought about, like, God, if you're in a bad mood, you could be like, oh, so look at them, so full of themselves and, like, so quick to be like, I'm a badass, I win. And when you're in a good mood, you're like, oh my God, like, that's great. Like, look at him go, like, all that talent paying off. So I liked thinking of each of them having their own little war of that. Also, of course, all of it seen through Joe's eyes, where no one is allowed to have an ego except Joe. And that was the main thing of, like, almost like designing them where something about each of them would just set him off and strike him as not fair, and some of them for sure more than others, you know.
It's going to be interesting to read, because I find that you, like, very flesh out your characters, like, even if they're like a small part, like, they're like a real person.
Even Benji from the first book, like, he was a real person. Unfortunately, he was a real person, and I met him.
It's the hardest thing about writing for me, that, like, I get to the end and especially this one, I feel like my editor was going to kill me, where it's like the copy edit, you know, like, there are deadlines that are real, where they have to get on the phone and be like, you understand that there's a printer and, like, this, it has to go. But I don't like saying goodbye to them. And it makes me so sad that, like, when they're going away, it's kind of like when you have to kill them on the page, it's like, and I think that's why I tend to, like, get obsessed with someone in the book. And then once they're disposed of, like, okay, now we're really going to go all in on this one, because that's part of my coping with, like, missing that character. And they do exist. And it's weird to me that I was in a bookstore the other day and I'm like, there's not a single book by Sarah Beth Swallows in here. And I was like, oh, you psycho. Like, she's not real. She's not real. Like, stop it. And I don't know. But
because I feel like I'll be like, I'll read this and I'll be like, I'll go look for their work, and then be like, but it does not exist.
Yeah.
Like, there's a book that I'm reading with a friend at work. Well, we're kind of like simultaneous reading the books together, but she's ahead of me, of the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. And she writes fake, like, it's about these men in Tennessee that are athletes or well-to-do businessmen or something, and they're all part of a book club and they read romance books to be better men. That's the whole premise.
Oh my God. Is it porn?
Pretty much in some of them, but I'm reading it, and they're always reading a book, the book club in the book, but they're not real books. But she's actually writing, like, the first book from the first book, like, as a real book.
She's doing that. Okay, that's awesome.
So she's now writing this historical romance that they talk about in the first book, and I'm like, because now I feel like, is that a real book? So I need to know how that ended, but it's not a real book.
And is she writing it as one of the characters or as herself? Like,
that's a good question. I don't know, because I don't think she wrote it. She came out with the 5th one, which I'm listening to, because that's the way I read books these days, is audio.
Yep.
But I was just like, oh, like, this is interesting, because this is a Christmas romance, and everything's Christmas in this one. And I'm like, this is fun. And I'm like, but I need to know about this. Yes. I mean, it's a romance, so happily ever afters. But I'm just like,
and now you get to know, like, that's
like, I'm just like, oh, this is fun. Is she gonna do it for the others? Because it's like 5 more. The thing with the 4th one is the main character's actually writing the book, so that's always interesting. But for this, like, I feel like just I'm reading, like I said, I had the Kirkus review up of just, you have a Obi-Wan playwright, you know, you have the Sarah Beth. I'm just, for the mystery, and I'm like, I'm going to want to find them, and they don't exist. And it's going to delve me into probably a whole fanfic world of, Oh my God, everyone loves is like, oh, what do you think about this? Because I mean, people do it, I know, of course, for the show, because Lord knows my YouTube has like random clips of different Netflix cast talking about the shows. So you pops up. Not that I'm not even caught up with the show, but it just pops up because I've been watching Shadow and Bone and watching those interviews of like mindless stuff doing chores around the house. But I'm just like, oh, I was like, oh, they're doing a quiz about you. Like, I should watch this in the background. And I'm gonna be like, are they real? Like, nope, they're characters, they're actors playing a character.
Yep.
Get into all of that.
The hardest thing that first season, once they were casting, and I'm like, well, now I don't want him to kill anyone. Like,
they're all real now.
Like, yeah, it's different when it's on the page. Like, I can go pretend someone's alive and write about them, but when it's someone's, like the guy who played Benji was just so good, and
yeah, so good.
He's well cast.
So I guess my question is now, because we only have a few minutes left, is there going to be another book?
We'll see. I mean, that's where like never say never. Like of course, everyone makes me want to write another one. Mm-hmm. So I hope so. I mean, I'm ready. I would like to.
Very cool.
My question is, how did you come up with the title for this one?
Yeah.
That was kind of war. Like just titles. Like I think the way you was so easy and so in your face and simple. Ever since then, every fucking title is like just war for me. Like with Providence, I wanted to call it Terrible Things. And then I got that email about a show that was coming out that had a little buzz called Stranger Things. Mm-hmm. And so with this book, finally, I feel like it was a combination of looking at song lyrics and the dedication quality of it, that like the kind of impossible thing of like, you dedicate a book to one person, mm-hmm. but you want everyone who reads it to feel like that person, which to me felt very Joe, and kind of his conundrum in this book of like, in that way, wanting mm-hmm. Wonder to be read and be loved, but like no one gets to love her like he loves her, and the impossibility of that.
Ooh. Thank you so much. I do hope no matter what you write next, be it another Joe book or anything else, or
more of that word.
Part 2, the revenge of ...
that word.
We'll see. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm gonna find the book now to read the short story.
Read it.
Yes. I have to find it. We don't have it on Overdrive, Libby, whatever you want to call it, and we don't have the physical book because I checked. So now I'm gonna have to find it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We'll make it happen. Yes,
I will.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Because then I'll be able to be like, I know the word.
Yes. You can scream it and yeah.
I know, really. Now I'm gonna have to try to figure out if I could get my hands on it before Wednesday, because Wednesday's Passover, and now I'm gonna be like, is it a word that I'm gonna hear?
Passover is a good deadline. Yes.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like,
all right.
You'll read it in a half a sitting. So once again, this was Jessica with Turn the Page podcast. My co-host was
Stacy,
and our amazing guest was
Caroline Kepnes,
author of You and You Love Me
and Providence and Hidden Bodies,
Only You,
and the newest book, For You and Only You. I have to say, every time one of the Joe books comes up, I just think of the song Only You by the Platters every time. Yeah. And I'm like, this is the unofficial song for me. I've gotta start it before I start the book. Like, let's get into a ritual.
I like that, because that's how I am with the writing. Yes.
Oh, nice.
So
come with me to the sea. I'm not going to start singing. I will not start singing.
So we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.